you spoke about the visual cues part because I wanted to get your thought on how memes or comics and a lot of what could help people gain attention to storytelling is helpful because we speak about how stand-up comedians or how people who are good storytellers use humor or memes and whatever we see today as different cues to engage the audience. So do you also believe in that tinge of humor as an element or using what we call memes and other, visual cues into picture? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I use a lot of humor. I think
Hmm.
essentially humor it's a beautiful tool that is not necessary, but is very, very helpful. I do stand-up comedy myself. So for humor
Oh,
purposes,
nice.
it comes easier for me. But everyone can be funny. People are not born funny. They learn how to be
Hmm.
funny either because they were lonely as a child and they wanted attention, or they're excellent listeners, or they studied comedy because became obsessed with it in an early age. But everyone
Yeah.
can learn to be funny. I teach 26 strategies that you can use to be funny. So it's certainly a
Hmm.
doable thing. I think people make a mistake when they don't use any humor,
Yeah.
even in the most sober moments. When my mom passed away, I was with the funeral director 2 days later
Hmm.
planning a funeral. And, obviously it was a very difficult time for me. And in the middle of the planning of the funeral director said something funny that made me laugh. And I was so happy that he had done that. Despite the fact it doesn't feel like the appropriate moment, it is absolutely the appropriate moment. So I believe in humor for sure. I believe
Hmm.
in even visual gags, we'll say. Steve Jobs' 2007 iPhone launch has a brilliant slide that makes everyone laugh. It's a picture of a janky iPhone that looks more like a kitchen timer. He puts it up there as a joke, to make us laugh at the right moment in that presentation. So I believe in all of those things. I
Hmm.
especially believe in the idea that people can learn to be funny, maybe not necessarily in regular life, but in
Right.
a prepared way. They can be prepared to be funny, for a speech, for a story, for a pitch deck, even if when they go out with their friends, they're still not very funny. They can prepare to be funny. And I think that's a great tool.
Right. I'm like, since you said like there are like so many strategies to get you started to be more vigilant of humor. Like, do you want to share one or two maybe simpler ones that somebody could just get started with? More to say, hey, I don't want to sound funny or be funny, more of an unnatural way, but something that I think I could start with to recognize and begin with good stories.
Well, they're probably using strategies right now they're not even aware of. Like exaggeration is an
Mhm.
easy strategy to use for humor.
Hmm.
My wife is Jewish and I am not. So we
Okay.
have Christmas in my home. And when my wife had her first Christmas with me 20 years ago, I let her pick out the
Mhm.
Christmas tree. And it was a terrible tree. It was a tree that only a Jewish woman could pick out. But when I describe it in the story, I tell people it was 3 feet tall and 7 feet wide. Right now, it wasn't really 3 feet tall and 7 feet wide. It was boxy, but I choose to exaggerate the dimensions of the
Right.
tree in order to produce a laugh. We do this all the time. People exaggerate constantly. Oftentimes, they're exaggerating for bad effect. But when you're
Hmm.
trying to point out something, a number, when you're trying to talk about the size of something, the frequency of something, these kinds of things, exaggeration is an easy strategy to use. One you hear
Yeah.
comics use all the time is something I call one of these things is not like the other. It's a game that used to be played on the show Sesame Street, which is essentially you
Mhm.
list things, two are expected, and then one is unexpected. Right. So
Mhm.
my son likes to use these a lot. He might say something like, I might say, "How was your school day?" And he might say something like, "I learned a lot. The teachers were very nice to me, and the pizza made me sick." He recognizes that if he does two positive things and then a negative thing, that will possibly produce a laugh. Now, that's not the best laugh in the world, but he's 12 years old. But comedians use this all the time. They set you up by making you think you're going to hear a list of three similar things, and really it ends up being two, and then one that is completely different. And oftentimes, if you can
Yeah.
make it completely outside the realm that you're speaking in, it often produces a large laugh. Simple things like that can be taught
Right.
or included in speeches to make people laugh.